Hello, everyone, and welcome to First Post America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And coming up, more on President Donald Trump's phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and the U.S. Supreme Court gives the White House a major win in its ongoing immigration efforts. All of this and more on the way, but first, here's a look at the latest headlines. Gaza authorities say at least 44 people have been killed in Israeli strikes across the war-ravaged Palestinian territory. This as Israel intensifies its offensive against Hamas and aid finally begins to trickle into the blockaded area. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says nuclear talks with the United States are likely to yield little to no results amid a diplomatic standoff over the Islamic Republic's uranium enrichment. Taiwan's president says the self-ruled island seeks peace and dialogue with China, but will continue to strengthen defenses. The remarks comes as the Taiwanese president marks his first year in office. Australia's National Party splits from its Conservative coalition partner of over 60 years, the Liberal Party, citing policy differences over renewable energy. This comes after a resounding loss for the two main opposition parties in the national election earlier this month. And Japan's Honda Motors announces it is scaling back its planned investment in electric vehicles due to slowing demand, instead focusing on capturing growing global interest in hybrid cars with new model launches. We begin with the developments coming in from the war in Europe. President Donald Trump has spoken to both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky on Monday. After his nearly 2.5-hour phone call with President Putin, the president said Russia and Ukraine would immediately begin negotiations towards a ceasefire. The president described the conversation as a breakthrough as he looks to push for an elusive deal to end the conflict that he promised on the campaign trail to resolve within 24 hours.
Spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. 5,000 young people every single week are being killed. So hopefully we did something.
However, Russian President Putin struck a more measured tone, saying he is now ready to work with Kyiv on a memorandum outlining a possible peace agreement, but insisted compromises will be required on both sides. He also thanked President Trump for supporting the resumption of direct talks between Moscow and Kyiv.
We agreed with the U.S. president that Russia will suggest and is ready to work with the Ukrainian side on a memorandum on a possible future peace treaty, which defines a number of issues, such as the principles of settlement, the terms of a possible peace agreement, and so on, including a possible ceasefire for a certain period of time, if the appropriate agreements are reached.
Now, as Moscow signaled cautious openness to negotiations, attention quickly shifted to Kyiv, where President Zelensky held his own discussions with President Trump both before and after the call with President Putin. Zelensky, who has in fact patched up relations with the U.S. president after a contentious meeting in the Oval Office, urged Trump to not make any decisions without Ukraine. He later said Kyiv and its partners might seek a high-level meeting among Ukraine, Russia, the United States, European Union countries, and Britain as part of a push to end the war.
We are considering a meeting of all teams again. We would like it to be at a high level: America, Ukraine, Russia, European countries, and Great Britain. Such meeting could take place in Turkey, Vatican, or Switzerland.
Meanwhile, President Trump later said that Pope Leo had expressed interest in hosting negotiations at the Vatican. The idea has found widespread attraction and appreciation from leaders across the world, including both Italy and Germany.
It'd be great to have it at the Vatican. Maybe it would have some extra significance. There's tremendous bitterness, anger, And I think maybe that could help some of that anger. So having it at the Vatican would be, in Rome, would be I think it would be a great idea.
And the Kremlin has also welcomed the offer at the Vatican, but said no final decision has been made on where talks might actually take place. It's also noted that no specific time frame for a ceasefire was discussed during the call between the two leaders. Furthermore, away from the diplomatic front, President Trump also made headlines at the White House event where he revealed that President Putin expressed admiration for First Lady Melania Trump. President Trump jokingly stated that Moscow, quote unquote, respected and liked the First Lady more than him. He made these comments while speaking at a White House ceremony where he signed the Take It Down Act, an initiative led by the First Lady aimed at combating deepfake pornography.
He's blessed to have such a dedicated and compassionate First Lady. I would tell you she is very dedicated. In fact, if you look at just what I heard, Putin just said they respect your wife a lot. I said, what about me? No, they like Melania better. That wasn't good. I don't know if that was good. I'm okay with it.
But despite this lighter moment, the talks are still in their very early stages, and with major differences still unresolved, the path to peace for Ukraine remains highly uncertain. And now we shift our attention to a significant development here in Washington. The U.S. Supreme Court has cleared the way for President Donald Trump's administration to end legal protections that have sheltered nearly 350,000 Venezuelans from deportation. In a ruling issued on Monday, the court allowed the Department of Homeland Security to terminate temporary protected status, or TPS, that was granted by President Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden. TPS allows nationals from countries facing war, disaster, or extraordinary conditions to live and work legally in the United States. While the designation is meant to be short-term, many protections have been extended for decades without a pathway to citizenship. In fact, days before leaving office, President Biden extended TPS for Venezuelans by 18 months, citing the ongoing crisis under President Nicolas Maduro. But the new administration is taking a different course. President Trump has vowed to deport record numbers of migrants in the country illegally, and his Secretary of Homeland Security has already moved to end TPS for Venezuelans, Haitians, Afghans, and Cameroonians.
The mission of the Department of Homeland Security is to secure our nation and to make sure that we're out there going after those that are the worst of the worst, the criminals, the bad actors.
And as part of the immigration crackdown, the Trump administration has also invoked a wartime law to fast-track the deportation of suspected Venezuelan gang members and has deployed troops to the southern border to deter illegal crossings. And in a first under a new program called Project Homecoming, the U.S. on Monday deported a group of undocumented migrants who chose to return voluntarily. A total of 64 migrants boarded a flight from Houston to Honduras and Colombia, each receiving a $1,000 stipend to leave the country legally with the option to apply for re-entry in the future.
Take control of your departure and receive financial support to return home. If you don't, you will be subjected to fines, arrest, deportation, and will never be allowed to return.
And now 38 migrants arrived in San Pedro Sula in Honduras, where officials say many expressed fear over growing hostility in the United States, including fears of going to work due to raids in restaurants and other workplaces. Honduran officials further confirmed that among the returnees were 19 children, including 4 born in the United States. To aid their reintegration, Honduran authorities are providing $100 in cash and an additional $200 in credit at a government-run store for basic necessities.
They say it's difficult, that there's a hostile atmosphere towards migrants, that they're afraid to go out to work or walk down the street, that sometimes there are raids in restaurants and workplaces. So it's a very unpleasant environment, and they say, no, I'd rather not live like this. I'm going back to my country.
Now, although the Trump administration aims to ramp up deportations, Honduras says that the numbers applying to self-deport will likely remain modest.
I don't think it will be thousands of people who apply for the program, but we will have quite a few cases, and it is our responsibility to ensure that they arrive in an orderly fashion on charter flights, that we have the manifest in advance so that there are no delays, and that we can support them in everything they need upon arrival to the country.
And with the Supreme Court now backing his immigration policies and the first voluntary deportation flights now complete, President Trump is making clear his administration is moving full speed ahead on immigration enforcement using both pressure and incentives to accelerate departures. Days after former President Joe Biden was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer, reactions continued to unfold. And even though President Donald Trump expressed sadness, he still could question the timing of the announcement. Vice President J.D. Vance also raised concerns over transparency regarding the former president's health, and Donald Trump Jr., who was the first to speak out, suggested a possible cover-up. But these remarks by Trump and his team on former President Biden's cancer battle have drawn widespread criticism. Here's more from our next report.
Just a day after former U.S. President Joe Biden announced that he's been diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer, political reactions are pouring in, some sympathetic, others stirring controversy. On Monday evening, President Donald Trump addressed the news with an uncharacteristic note of sadness. Very sad, he told reporters. But then, with a characteristic twist, he added, "I'm surprised the public wasn't notified a long time ago."
Do you want to respond to President Biden being diagnosed with cancer? Are you going to call your predecessor?
I think it's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, the public wasn't notified a long time ago, because to get to stage 9, that's a long time.
Trump then appeared to confuse the medical terminology when he pointed out that the former president has a Gleason score of 9, which indicates an aggressive cancer, and questioned why wasn't Biden's cognitive ability discussed before.
And it takes a long time to get to that situation. Now, I think, to get to a stage 9, there are things going on that the public wasn't informed, and I think somebody's going to have to speak to his doctor, if it's the same, or even if it's 2 separate doctors. Why wasn't the cognitive ability, why wasn't that discussed? And I think
the 82-year-old former president's diagnosis, confirmed Friday, came after a small nodule was discovered earlier this month. His team said the cancer is aggressive and has spread to the bone, but remains hormone sensitive, which allows for treatment options. Now, while questioning Biden's diagnosis, the commander-in-chief then also took the opportunity to highlight his own health, claiming he aced his recent cognitive tests.
I just had my physical. You saw that. You saw the results of that particular test. I think that test is standard to pretty much anybody getting a physical, good physical.
Then, shortly after, Vice President J.D. Vance offered a more pointed take. Having just returned from Rome, where he met Pope Leo, Vance questioned the timing and transparency of the diagnosis.
And why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff. Like I will say, whether the right time to have this conversation is now or at some point in the future, we really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job.
While Vance was careful not to place all the blame on Biden, he instead pointed to those around him.
Look, I mean, that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him.
Then came Donald Trump Jr., who was the first to react strongly and publicly. In a post on X, he questioned whether the diagnosis had been concealed. How did Dr. Jill Biden miss stage 5 metastatic cancer, or is this yet another cover-up, he wrote. Trump Jr. also revived a 2022 clip where Biden said, "I and so damn many other people I grew up with have cancer."
So damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
At the time, the White House clarified Biden was referring to his past treatment for non-melanoma skin cancers and not a current diagnosis. The announcement has reignited discussions already heating up ahead of Tuesday's release of Original Sin, a new book by CNN's Jake Tapper and Axios reporter Alex Thompson. The book paints a damning portrait of Biden's final months in office, alleging that aides covered up signs of his physical and cognitive decline. It even claims staff discussed whether he might soon need a wheelchair. So, as Biden and his family weigh treatment options, the political world is left grappling with bigger questions about leadership, health, and how much the public deserves to know.
And now moving to South America, where tensions are rising fast in Venezuela just days before a crucial election. On Monday, Venezuela's Interior Minister announced the immediate suspension of all flights from neighboring Colombia. The drastic move came after authorities arrested 38 individuals, including 17 foreigners, allegedly involved in a plot to destabilize the country ahead of the May 25th parliamentary and gubernatorial elections. According to the
When we check flights from Colombia that come from other destinations and enter Venezuela through Colombia, these are flights from Colombia. We have given the instruction to suspend all the flights from Colombia to our country because the information we have is related to this type of movement of people.
According to the Venezuelan minister, the detained individuals were carrying explosive devices and planning attacks on sensitive locations such as hospitals, embassies, and police command centers. He claimed that the suspects, a mix of Venezuelans and foreign nationals from countries including Colombia, Mexico, and Ukraine, involved bomb experts, human smugglers, and mercenaries.
There are already 38 new mercenaries arrested. The Albanian mafia that governs Ecuador sent part of its trained mercenaries to plant bombs in Venezuela. They have been captured.
The Venezuelan Aviation Authority later confirmed that the flight ban would last until May 26 at 6 p.m. local time, a day after the scheduled elections. Colombia's Minister of Foreign Affairs also stated that Venezuela had informed them flights would resume the day after the vote. Now, additionally, the ministry said it had not received any official information regarding the arrest of Colombian nationals.
And once we were on the plane, they made us get off because an announcement came from Venezuela that they were canceling all flights.
The latest development comes amid a tense political atmosphere following Venezuela's disputed July 28th presidential election. President Nicolas Maduro was declared the winner, but the opposition and several foreign governments have rejected the results, citing credible allegations of electoral fraud. In fact, in a separate televised meeting, President Maduro linked the alleged plot to an Albanian crime group involved in drug trafficking in Ecuador. He claimed this organization was working with Venezuelan opposition forces to disrupt the election process.
38 new mercenaries have been detained. The Albanian mafia that governs Ecuador sent some of their trained mercenaries to plant bombs in Venezuela. They have been captured. As I have denounced, we have the Albanian mafia. We seized 3 phones from them, and they are talking.
Tensions have been building in the country as prominent opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has called for a boycott of the upcoming election. In fact, recently 5 members of her staff who had sought refuge in diplomatic compound for over a year left the country. And while the United States called it a rescue operation, Venezuelan authorities said it was the result of negotiations with Maduro's government. Dozens of Machado's allies, including her lawyer and campaign workers, remain imprisoned. Until now, President Gustavo Petro of Colombia, who restored diplomatic relations with Venezuela back in 2022, has not yet publicly responded. But with both countries walking a tightrope and the elections just days away, one question now looms large over the region. What exactly will happen on May 25th? And finally, we end today looking at a major escalation initiated by the Yemen-based Houthi rebels. They've announced a maritime blockade on Haifa, Israel's largest port. The facility is a crucial hub for international trade, and according to the Houthis, any ship docked in or heading to Haifa is now a legitimate target. In fact, for months, the Iranian proxy has targeted ships in the Red Sea that they claimed were linked to Israel. They say their actions are in response to Israel's hostilities in Gaza And now, what does this blockade mean, and why is this threat much closer to home for Israel? Our final story has more.
Israel's biggest maritime gateway, the Haifa port, is under threat. The Houthis, a proxy group backed by Iran, have announced a maritime blockade on the facility. They claim any ship docked in or heading to Haifa will be attacked.
The Yemeni armed forces, relying on Allah and trusting in Allah, have decided, with Allah's help, to implement the leadership's directives to begin working to enforce a naval blockade of the port of Haifa. Accordingly, all companies with ships present in or heading to this port are hereby notified that, as of the time of this announcement, the aforementioned port has been included in the target bank. They are urged to take into consideration the contents of this statement and any subsequent announcements.
For months, the Houthis have disrupted global trade. Their attacks in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, which they say are in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, have forced reroutes, delayed cargo, and triggered Western retaliation. But why is the development concerning Haifa alarming? Until now, the Houthi strikes were concentrated in the Red Sea. But Haifa lies on the Mediterranean Sea, far from the Red Sea, which has been the conflict zone. Unlike the Ashdod port, which is close to the Gaza Strip and has seen repeated rocket threats, Haifa is in Israel's north and has largely remained insulated from direct attacks. Haifa is also the busiest and Israel's largest international seaport. Annually, about 30 million tons of cargo arrive at the facility. In 2023 alone, Haifa handled roughly 22.1 million metric tons of freight. Israel's main naval base is also located here. Haifa is a passage connecting Asia, Europe, and West Asia. It has also drawn foreign investment and attention due to its location. In 2023, India's largest port operator completed an acquisition of the port in partnership with an Israeli-based firm. In March 2025, Israel's government gave approval to a Chinese state-owned company to expand operations at Haifa's Bay port. Israel largely depends on overseas projects to improve and run its ports. Some 98% of Israel's foreign trade passes through seaports. With the announcement of the Haifa blockade, the conflict is now sailing into Israel's heart of trade and closer to the country's shores.
That's going to do it for us today. We certainly thank you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you once again right back here again tomorrow, everyone. Thanks again for watching.